Hello everybody, it's here with the birds back with another Shadowlands video. And in this video I'd like to go over two of the dungeons with this new Holy Paladin playstyle, and specifically just kind of walk through a few things. My thoughts about my performance, so looking at mistakes largely and talking about where I think I could make up efficiencies and make the flow of the gameplay easier or better for my group. I'd also like to comment on things like Martyr usage, light of the Martyr being an ability which generally speaking is not used by Holy Paladins because you injure yourself in order to heal your allies, but it has a really high spell power coefficient, and there are some conduits that we will be able to spec into later that allow us to really pump out a lot of throughput with this ability. I really like it even in Mythic Plus for a few reasons that I'll talk about as these two videos go forward. And then also I'm going to talk, I think, at large about the playstyle that involves the use of Beacon of Virtue. So as we get started in this dungeon, there's a few things that I want to note. First of all, these are heroic dungeons. We're just getting some of our guildies going who are just dinging 60. We're going to be doing a couple fairly large pulls throughout this dungeon just to test out some of the damage profiles and see how things feel. You'll note here I'm spending a little bit of time when the tank is getting hit by these enraged mobs, martyring while I'm filling in with holy shocks and crusader strikes. And I think one of the things that I've been learning a little bit as I've been practicing this build in more and more difficult content, especially in Theater of Pain on Mythic, which was a fairly difficult and challenging fight. Just in general, there's a lot going on in that fight. I think it's Meridreth or something like that. And on Mythic difficulty, you really have to be prepared with your cooldowns and ready to rock and roll because there's a ton of movement coming away from the boss and working your way back to the center, keeping your allies topped off while the shadows and spirits come flying through the room. All of which this kit here, the kind of melee paladin that foregoes any casted spells, really shines in because you can be on the move and still keep your group topped off. So you can see just the basic format of this gameplay is going to be trying to do a kind of smoothing of damage across the health bars in order to set up Beacon of Virtue moments. And what I mean by that is Beacon of Virtue has a 15-second cooldown, so you're trying to manage the damage intake, not so much to have every person completely topped off, but to be prepared for any specific burst damage that comes in. So lots of bosses have burst moments, lots of adds. You'll see in a moment in this fight also have burst moments where they do kind of a cascading pulse. You want your virtue to be present and ready to go for those moments. So keeping them topped off means a lot of times, hitting my own 42-second self-defensive and martyring people to smooth out the meter so everyone's a little bit damaged in preparation for it. Sometimes it means pooling holy power a little bit to be prepared for it. And other times it just means spending holy power on damaging abilities like Shield of the Righteous. But I think as far as my own improvement going forward, one thing I'm looking to do is I think switch out my judgment use. So press Crusader Strike a little more often than I am currently doing, and probably that would be substituted into a few of my judgment casts. The reason for that is, and here's a big pull to kind of give you a bit of an example, when your GCDs are maxed out and you have to really perform well in a difficult situation, what you don't want to be doing is running into holy power and casting judgment. So the habit that gets you to cast judgment instead of Crusader Strike to bring back your holy shock is one that needs to be tuned up a little bit. So that's what I kind of want to look forward to. You saw there an example of Beacon being used alongside, Divine Toll being used alongside Beacon of Virtue, and I just think, guys, this is such a fantastic tool. You'll see it a number of times in the two videos as we go forward. Virtue combined with this really low CD toll is so impressive in my mind. So here we go with like just Holy Shock and one Word of Glory within the beacon window, and it absolutely tops everybody off. Here we have Virtue back again, and we can top everyone off with one press of Word of Glory. It's just astounding how good this is. And while we're waiting for those to come down, or if we have to go at range, we can kind of martyr people to smooth out the meters, always hitting our defensive cooldowns whenever there's need. Some of the harder dungeons, especially when you're doing Mythic in low gear, will require you to really hold on to your Holy Power just a little bit longer than you might be used to. I think, of course, this will not be a trend for the raid. This pull here was a good example. We wanted to get our warrior to grab the gargoyle and use it on the boss, so he goes off and grabs it. And then when we pull, we don't give the boss enough time to kill the ads, which is what he normally does. Instead, they remain enemies, and so they're going to add a lot of damage into this fight. So we'll see how this performs. Early on, I'm just going to try my best to rebuild resources in preparation for a lot of these burst windows that are coming out, all the while hitting my defensive so I can martyr people and smooth damage, just leaning into my virtue windows as much as I possibly can, and then just using your normal tools like bop and sacks. The interesting thing about this is the tank actually dies, and so we have an opportunity to see how much throughput we can push out under duress. And these are great moments to see kind of what you're made of and what kind of tools you have. I've bubbled already at this point, so I don't have that available to me. And we're just hoping to keep this warrior online for a little bit longer. Earth Ellie is out, obviously, but you'll just see here how Virtue picks up the whole group in these difficult moments. You only need to get out your 2 Word of Glories and a Shock to make it really that useful. And here it's just back up once again. Down goes the boss. So I think in duress, this version of Holy Paladin can really stand up to the pressure. And this is, again, very true even in the Mythic dungeons we were doing when we were doing a bit of pushing earlier. Just trying to grab a bit of 180 gear. One of the things I found useful for Martyr, just as an aside, is it's a nice ability to use as you're moving through content. You don't have to stop and flash heal your group. You can just be on the go, and what I've tended to do over time is martyr each of my members if they're kind of at 80% or something, and then pick myself up with a Holy Shock. So I think the theme that I've seen going forward is there's a lot more Holy Shocks that go into myself, and you spend probably about 50% of your martyrs on the tank. In my gear, you can see here on the left the numbers showing Martyr is hitting anywhere between 2k to about 8 to 10k under some conditions, which is quite a lot of healing for an instant cast ability. And I just found in this high pressure situation, even though Martyr seems like a bad call because you're killing yourself, it's been a lifesaver. There's so many times when a mechanic is coming down, you need to, within the span of a half GCD, make sure that person's okay. And it's been really good. So you can see I can just shock them and martyr them as we go up the hill. Pretty straightforward stuff. Obviously the reason why a few more shocks are going into myself is I cannot martyr myself. And there's a good pattern of going back and forth between martyring somebody else to heal them up and then just picking myself up with a little shock. But largely what you're hoping to do on the whole is keep your virtues tied to 5 holy power moments. So I build up to 5 whenever I possibly can, and then I try to hold that. I'll just martyr somebody instead of using a holy power to top them off or to smooth the threshold of damage. And then when a damage moment is about to come out, we want to have the holy power prepared for the slam. So here comes the slam. Press our virtue immediately, get our Word of Glory in, get our shock in, and then in this case we also decided to spend Divine Toll just to make sure everyone's okay. So as far as mistakes are concerned, I mentioned probably not pressing Crusader Strike as much as I'd like. I think there's a few other things that I need to get used to a little bit more. One is that I need to press my own Divine Protection far more often than I am doing. It is such an amazing ability for the Martyr build. Part of the reason for that is the way that damage reduction scales. So a 20% DR plus the 3% from Devotion Aura that we get, all are going to contribute to really, really powerful contributions from Martyr that are not going to hurt us anywhere near as much as they normally would. Here's another really kind of difficult pack that enrages. So there's going to be a lot of tank damage coming out. I sack him immediately. He's going to have to kite. So I'm just martyring him in these windows while he's moving and while shock is on CD, and then I pick him back up as we get shock back off with Word of Glory. So that's another common feature. But again, outside of your own, pressing my own Divine Protection far more often, because if we take the talent that reduces the CD on it, it's just ready to go all the time. I also want to make use of Bubble. In this case, you're almost always going to want to lay on hands other members and always use Bubble for yourself. And you don't want to bop yourself, you always want to bubble. And the reason for that, I mean obviously you can bop if you really need it or something, but the reason for that of course is you give yourself immunity and you can martyr for free within that window. So if you put wings on and use martyr, you're getting a ton of healing. You'll see if you follow the little left side of the screen where the health is showing up, there's just so much you can do with this spell. It's really good in the middle of Avenging Wrath, especially because you taught people, I think I hit people for 10k martyrs, and we're in 160 gear. I can't imagine how this scales once I have the conduit for it. Again, Elise is another fight. I think I've showcased this in another video, so I don't want to talk too much about it, but again, it really plays into the strengths of this build, getting yourself to 5 holy power, and then immediately converting that into huge throughput through virtue. You can use Holy Avenger instead of Divine Purpose here as well, but I just like the Avenging Wrath uptime. Seems to really synergize nicely with this build. Here's round 2. We Divine Toll, grab everyone with those 5 holy power coming out of it. It's just excellent stuff. Alright, let's move on to the second video. Just so you get a bit of sense of some of the footage and some of the fights that are going on here. The other side has a couple of interesting mob burst moments. One you see here, but essentially on any one of these platforms where you do these big pulls, you'll have a lot of chaotic elements going on. And again, the burst damage coming out through those ground effects, through the Risen Warlord and others doing casts. You'll have to watch out for some of the bosses in this encounter for really high spiky burst windows, specifically the last boss. So you're going to be separated as a group and people are going to be kind of injured. And also when you're fighting the boss himself, there's some high burst moments that come out, but we'll get to that when we get to the boss itself. Mostly you'll want to concentrate on making sure you have 5 holy power up for moments like this, so I would suggest judging the Death Speaker in the opener, and then trying to build up to 5 for the burst that comes out. On Mythic Plus this will be a lot of damage. Tank's going to take a lot of damage at the beginning, so you could sack him at the beginning as well, and just martyr to try to get yourself ready to go. You can see here I'm kind of behind, so I toll, and that's because I didn't listen to my own advice. So here's an area of improvement, just making sure in those initial parts you shock into Crusader Strike twice to have the resources you need to pump out healing. If you were doing a different build with Glimmer, I think Glimmer is potentially really weak. partly because it doesn't offer you the burst healing that you might need to pick somebody up, and you sacrifice the ability to convert a single shock and a single word of glory into a great deal of healing. So here we go, Virtue, bam. You can see the beacon itself hit for 7k. There's another one, beacon hitting, overhealing for about 12k. In this kind of gear, that's an impressive conversion of GCDs into healing. So I'm really nervous for a lot of paladins who are going to take Glimmer, because this is the ability we've been using for a long time, and maybe they watch some of their favorite personalities using it. And my point is not to say that Glimmer's bad, but I think we have to be careful to suggest to people something that doesn't necessarily give them all the tools up front to deal with these hectic situations. But yeah, so I'd like to see more usage of my own defensives to facilitate more throughput healing through Martyr. I'd like to see a little bit more use of Crusader Strike to build resources. These are things that just kind of come with time as you're working out the different pieces of your kit and your build. But it's really hard to deny just how strong you can pump out the heals in a given set of GCDs. Boom. Another 15k beacon of light transfer. I think there's a point in the dungeon where I kind of show the breakdown for the healing, and I'll just comment on that when it comes up on the screen so you can get a sense of what I'm looking for when I see these numbers and what they mean. Other pieces too, more Hammer of Justice casts could be implemented, more weaving of our blessings and lay on hands as well. More trinket usage. I have an unused trinket that gets paired up with wings, but I don't usually pay attention to it too much right now because it has a ground effect that I can take into account, and yet I have not done that. I also need a slightly better strategy for away from boss. It just needs a kind of refinement of how I'm going to approach it. So whether it's deliberately knowing I'm going to be at range for a few seconds and choosing to use beacon and flash heal into the beacon 3 or 4 times in a row, both for the healing it provides and also to build resources, I think that's a reasonable way to go forward with it. You can see there in 3 GCDs the entire group is topped, and just this is going to scale really well, I think, because Word of Glory is going to be a strong single target bomb. It has a good base spell coefficient. As we get more crit, as we get more haste and get more uptime through Awakening on Avenging Wrath, all of these abilities are just going to become stronger and stronger. Here's the breakdown I was talking about. So it was just briefly shown there, but the takeaway for me is how high Beacon of Virtue is on the list, and I think this really dwarfs any kind of setup where Glimmer is present. Here's a really good pull where we pull a lot of stuff and you have the Enraged Spirit bursting out a lot of damage. And again, we'll have this same thing when we go to the other side as well. So just learning how to manage the movement between Virtue, Word of Glory, and Holy Shock, and then rebuilding those resources to get yourself another Holy Shock or Word of Glory is really key to this playstyle. And once that pattern is set in your mind, you'll just be so confident on any given pull, because you'll know that as soon as that virtue goes down, you have complete dominance on the health of your party members. You just know that when you move to heal somebody over here, you're not having to make this horrible choice of do I save the shaman, do I save the mage? You don't have to be thinking in your mind, does the mage have block up? He may, but your GCDs are just converted into so much power. A little bit of tank damage coming out here. We still want to be in melee, just Crusader striking to build that back up. Here we've got some area damage coming out, but it's not too much of a nuisance, so we're just going to martyr a little bit and then smooth it out by shocking ourselves. You can see that pattern here. Now we know we have a burst window mob coming out, so we're going to pop our devotion aura, just make sure this mage is healthy, and then probably end up, I think we told ourselves to just clean up that pull. We can martyr as we're moving. Martyr there hit for 8k, guys. There goes another one for 7k. Instant cast, heal, and then you just shock yourself back. So martyr within wings is really potent. That probably means going forward that, like with any melee Glimmer build, haste is going to be really significant. There's a pull coming up actually, so you can line of sight this defunct dental drill, but there's a pull coming up where we don't line of sight the haywire, and we did it on purpose. But it's a good example of where I was not really prepared with my holy power usage to deal with the spread damage, and I think you'll see here it's just a good example of what not to do and how to think about each of these pulls within Mythic Plus. So that's kind of what I like about this melee paladin version, is you have a lot more control because of this 15-second window of how to deal with the different mechanics, when you're going to be able to bring everyone out of the grave. I never really feel like I'm falling behind. I just feel like I'm smoothing things, almost like a brewmaster's shuffle, or the health transfer from the gameplay of a resto shaman. You just kind of smoothing out the bars, making sure this guy's topped a little bit, and then you lean completely into virtue for 2 GCDs and top everyone off. So as we go through the tunnel here, there's another dental drill that does haywire, and I'm like, let's just take it. You'll see here I don't really have enough holy power to deal with this haywire. I'm kind of like, oh, maybe I'll stand out, maybe I'll stay in. I should be at 5 here on pull. You can see here that I only got 1 word of glory and then 1 holy shock. So obviously it doesn't kill us, but it's a great example of wanting to be prepared, knowing which mobs you're fighting. Again, I can just martyr myself all the way into the grave because my tank is the one who's sort of on the docket. He's getting hit. We want to focus on his health. This is a theme I think I want people to understand for Holy Paladin and Light of the Martyr, that it doesn't really matter. The self-damage is irrelevant. And the people who talk to you about it, like it makes a big difference, they're wrong. I don't care if they're Mythic Raiders. They're wrong. As long as you are understanding how to manage your own health pool and understanding the stakes, you should never die as a Holy Paladin. You have bubbles, you have really short CD, DR, you have your own devotion aura running, you have aura mastery, all of these insane DR tools. So you're in melee, so you can always be moving, and in this mode you can basically be instant casting everything. So you should never die when you're doing this build, and as a result, Martyr is always a really great option. I'd Martyr even when you're really low. If you're down in 20% land, forget about it. Just Martyr. You can always bring yourself back up with a Holy Shock. You're Kyrian, so you have your free pot. These are just resources that you should be ready to use. I think there's a little bit of burst on the Millhouse Mana Storm fight. Let's see how I do as far as building Holy Power. Again, once you get comfortable with this build, and this is, again, another tool set that's natural for the Glimmer build, oscillating between Holy Shock and Crusader Strike. Once you're comfortable with it, it'll be okay, and building resources will come naturally. But at the beginning, I think a lot of players moving from a traditional healer to a melee healer will probably find there's a bit of tunnel vision that occurs, by which I mean that you're looking at the bars and you're looking at your buttons to watch for low CDs to press, and you're also trying to pay attention to the environment. And you have to pay attention to the environment like a melee player, with like jerk reactions to area ground effects, cleaves that you have to avoid, conal abilities, all of these things that are kind of nasty. So give yourself a bit of a break if you're transitioning to this kind of a build. And remember that even though you want to be as efficient as you can with your Holy Power, you want to make sure you're cooling down Holy Shock appropriately with Crusader Strike. You're not always going to get it right, and part of what Virtue offers you is a kind of get out of jail free set of conditions. So that you know, as long as Virtue is ticking down to cooldown, you have a button to press that will immediately help stabilize your group. And here you can weave it in here, guys. There's no mana problems at all. You can see I've been showing you these two videos, and I've been hovering around 80 to 90% mana all the time, and this doesn't change. You're never gonna run out of mana as a Holy Paladin in Mythic Plus. It will be a little bit more challenging in raids, I think, but if you stick to the Martyr gameplay, I think you'll also be fine in that environment. And it will just be a matter of converting every single GCD into a useful ability, whether it's building up your Holy Power or using your Martyr effectively with its low mana cost. I think we head off to the next set of bosses, and there's a fairly big platform pull here. Due to the nature of the kind of immunities that Paladin offers, and I think here's another pull where we get some ads. I think Paladin is a really good candidate for extremely large pulls. You can bop targets, you have a personal stun. Oh, maybe we just freeze these guys. You have a lot of burst tools with Virtue to deal with almost anything. Divine Toll is such a low CD that it's immediately like boom, 2 GCDs and everybody is fine, guys. It's unbelievable. And then on top of that, like, and you can do this with Glimmer build. If you press Divine Toll with the Glimmer build, yeah, everyone's fine as well. Agreed. But you don't have the same Holy Power conversion afterwards. You don't have the second wave of hits that happen. So Virtue gives you time to do Toll for the initial burst, and then the second burst you get Word of Glory, and then Holy Shock. If you had Avenging Wrath up, there's just no chance that your party dies under those conditions. I hate this hallway, by the way. See, you can Martyr on the go, and then just Holy Shock yourself. I think I Martyr him again because I'm in the window. There's more Martyrs, but I have Divine Protection up, so it doesn't actually do that much. So maybe I'll talk a little bit as we get closer to the end of this video, just about some of the choices I'm making, what I'm actually kind of thinking about, what buttons I'm paying attention to. Generally speaking, I'm looking at the mobs first. I'm trying to ascertain if I need to judge something to stun it in a Mythic Plus setting. My mouse, because I'm using mouse over macros, is hovering over the tank for Holy Shocks, and then I will bring it up into the middle of the screen to rotate my camera around. So right around where my character player is, you'll see my mouse moving my character around a little bit. It's a little bit less than ideal to move the camera this way. Obviously everyone has to do something like this, but that's one of the things that you'll have to get used to as a melee healer. Moving the camera to see where the action is includes, if you have mouse over macros, moving away from your targets essentially. And at range, this is less significant because if you're a shaman or druid or monk or priest, you're far away from the boss, you don't have to tilt and adjust your camera too much. to see where the action is. As a melee, you're right there, and so you need to be prepared to do that. I would say this is another reason why I think for the average paladin, Light of Dawn is a really difficult spell to get correctly. Whether you're using the legendary or not to get the extra area, what makes Light of Dawn very difficult actually has to do with its positionality. It's learning how to point it in a cone at the right people takes a lot of effort and a lot of work, and I don't think there's the same payoff versus using Virtue and tossing around huge Word of Glories that, irrespective of where your target is always going to land, and the beacon is always going to do its work. So that's one of the things that I think about when I'm first engaging in a pull. Who can I judge? Who can I hammer of judgment to stun? How's my tank doing with shocks? And then getting myself in a position along the edge of a mob, dropping consecration down and trying to build up my holy power for a burst moment. If the tank is taking a lot of damage and it warrants me wingsing to keep him up, I'll do that. Generally speaking, in the gear I'm in, we don't need wings to top the group with Beacon of Virtue and Word of Glory. We're okay with the Word of Glory shock combo, but you'll see sometimes you just realize I think I need this right now, and you'll get a feel for that too. But a lot of it has to do with positioning my character's body alongside one of the mobs and not losing track of those mobs so that I can effectively Crusader strike. So you'll see I'm constantly kind of stutter stepping with my A and D keys back and forth, and this is in part so that I can always have a visual representation of where my character is while my eyes are moving back and forth between the health bars of my party members and the area. But it's also because it's a good habit for dodging mechanics as a melee. If you get in the habit of not moving at all, the second that little swirly comes out, you will not have the muscle memory in your head to be moving. But if you're always kind of stuttering a little bit, I pulled by accident here, then you will always have that habit to kind of move out of the way. There's a lot of ground effects that you can see here. I think also, just a mistake, something I'd like to fix is probably the camera angle. I want to probably have a little bit of a higher camera angle, though I need to sort out exactly the best way to do this. You notice that this sort of less than 3/4 view, it impedes sometimes a little bit on my ability to deal with things. So there was an example again of just shock Word of Glory picking the entire group up. I haven't even used Toll yet. That was through one Virtue. I just smooth it out there by hitting the tank with another Martyr, and we're ready for the next round of Virtue. Boom, there's another one, and off we go. I get a few procs, so if you are going to use Divine Purpose, I'd also recommend thinking about holding on to those procs and having a really nice way to track them. The golden bar that appears over top of your character seems a little bit translucent to me. So the hope is, or the usefulness would be to have a weak aura that you can see, like the one that appears on the left, to tell you when you have that free proc ready to go for Word of Glory. And then you can watch it tick down so you know how much time you have to use it. I found it really helpful to not immediately cast that free Word of Glory if you can help it. It just allows you to put more into your burst window. Here we get another sense of the breakdown. I've just been testing out shielding words instead of the Holy Shock Toll conduit. And you can see Beacon of Light doing so much work, and Light of Martyr actually present there for that fight a good deal as well, smoothing things out. I think shielding words is going to be excellent going forward, but obviously the combination of having Divine Toll hit 3 more times is really probably the place you want to be at the beginning of the expansion when you don't have very many conduits available to you. This fight is interesting from a positional point of view, so it's nice to be able to show you what I'm thinking about while we pull Musala. That little line going across, the pattern that goes across the map or the boss encounter room is sort of your melee range for standing. You can see we're just right around there for attacking the boss. This seems to me the best place to be, and you can mark off in your mind the right side by the little dip on the right and the left side by the dip on the left. So if you're standing right around that line, he won't hit you with his smash. If you're standing right in the center, he won't hit you with either his left side or his right. Just note that you will be targeted by that little mechanic to get out. So this is really a fight where people need to have their own personal play down, both for that phase and also for this one. You'll see the purple swirls coming down. So I just kind of step out of that, always moving just a little bit so I know where my character is while I heal my party members. And you just grab this and head back in. People will be injured. There will be a sense of urgency to get back and heal them and pop cooldowns to do so. I just be careful about that. There is a lot of sort of damage that comes out just by people misplaying, so you'll want to probably save your virtue for that. I don't think you necessarily have to save your wings, but here's where you would want to use virtue, probably wings, or if you have the combo like I just got there, use that up instead. It's one of the reasons why I like Divine Purpose, because it's a meteor word of glory that goes into the beacon targets, so you can kind of pair that up against using Divine Toll. If you have Toll ready and you get a proc, you can save Toll and just use the extra word of glory proc, and that should top your group fairly reasonably. If you don't get the procs and you kind of need the extra healing to go into the beacons, then you just hit Divine Toll. Other than that, it's kind of just a rinse and repeat fight. And since I've kind of spoken about most of the things that I wanted to showcase for you guys, I just want to encourage you at the end of this video, give us a try. Leave some comments below if you have questions about positioning or the gameplay. When you're just learning this, I again focus on the main mechanic of building up holy power for burst windows and making good use of your virtue, but you don't have to be greedy with it. It comes back every 15 seconds. You'll never have mana problems, so just use it liberally to get used to the habit of using it, and then just watch the damage patterns of the fight. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. I look forward to presenting some more content, specifically some of our Mythic Plus. Thanks for watching.